Good morning. Good morning, all. Good morning,
Good
Ajahn
morning.
Jan. Can you hear me clearly?
Everyone. Is the
Good
sound
morning,
working?
everyone.
Good morning. Lovely to hear so many.
Good morning.
Good morning. Lovely to hear so many people online and see so many people online. If possible, please open your camera so we can see and just have a bit more interaction. My name is Leonie Pearson. I'm the Senior Research Fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute and the Research Coordinator for the SUMERNET program. And it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the SUMERNET training on rights-based approaches for water research. We have our fabulous advisor, Ajahn Jan, that will be running us through a really engaging and interactive session. She wants to hear your voices, she wants to hear your questions, and she's here to answer any concerns or issues that you might have. The morning is set up so that we'll be running for 2 hours. Some is together, others is in breakout rooms. I'd just like to start by, as I've said, welcoming everyone. I'd also like to ask that we all mute our microphones when we're not talking. See if we can engage as much as possible. The success of this session will depend on how you engage with the questions, queries, and content that's going to be presented. So without further talking, I'd like to hand over to Ajahn Jan, say thank you very much, and we look forward to a great morning.
Okay, thank you, Leonie, and good morning again, everyone. It's great to see many of you joining the session this morning. I'm sitting in Bangkok, or not quite Bangkok, but at Salaya Mahidol University. If any of you have been here at the Institute of Human Rights and Peace Studies. So I've been working with the SUMERNET program since last year. So met some of your, I guess, team members who participated in the workshop. No, actually, must be before COVID. So year before 2019 then, in 2019. Yeah, so this morning's session would try to go help you explore a little bit more, have a little bit more clarity on working with rights-based approach in your own research. I'm not sure how many of you are already running the projects that have been granted. And I was told that most of you are running the project now, and a few of you have joined with the new project to be started, right? In any case, I would like to find out first with the next slide. I don't know how you would be able to do this, but I would like to hear any questions or expectations that you may have for this session. Would people be able to write their questions somewhere and then share with everyone?
Please go to your Vivox app, and I'll run the first poll. If you see on the screen or your app, you will see this question. And please write any question or expectation that you have for this training session.
Yes, in case you've been wondering what human rights-based approaches are, or any questions that you may have, if you've already been running your project, or what do you expect to get out of this training session? So that would help me see where you are at, and just to make sure where I could emphasize a little bit more in my slides or in my input. So that would be helpful for your needs. Please don't be shy. Just put down any questions. Don't think that it might be irrelevant or silly questions. Anything at all. This is what I usually do when I go to training with people who are not working in human rights. And I'm sure there are different questions. Could be simple, anything. Okay, yeah. So you haven't had any experience on rights-based approach before. Okay, you want to know more about it. How do human rights principles seek to support water insecurity studies in the Mekong region? Good. Yes, we don't know who put up the question, so don't worry about it. You can just type anything. It's new for you. Okay. You want to apply it into your research. Good. Any quick questions that you can ask yourself to start integrating human rights-based approach? Okay, yes, we have a lot of questions you can start asking. Okay, well, we might not get everyone on the poll, but that's fine. So I assume many people are new to human rights-based approach. And if we have anyone who's already experimenting with the rights-based approach or human rights principles, please, you're well welcome to share your experience as well. Okay, so why don't we close the poll now, and I'll just move to the next um, exercise. We still have one more. And so just going to show the next slide, which is a quiz. And this is just to test your understanding of what you think is related to rights-based approach, human rights-based approach. Okay, what of the following situations reflects the human rights-based approach? You can choose more than one answer. So I guess you choose the one that reflects the human rights-based approach. I'm not sure where this background noise coming from, but I see some echoing all the time. I hear some echoing. Okay, how many people have we got responding? Is 7 out of 11? Is that what it is? Let's see. So we have, how many participants do we have?
อาจารย์
20. Yeah. So we have 12 people signed up on the poll. Is that it? And 8 have responded. I see this number 8/12. Okay. So how many people have responded, Kun Eggers?
10 out of 13 อาจารย์
10 out of 13. Okay, so we have 13 participants, or we have more, but only 13 have joined this poll.
We have around 18 or 19 in this call.
Okay. Okay. So not everyone has joined the poll. Maybe there's some technical problems. Okay. Anyway, right. So we can see that, okay, I guess some people cannot join the poll for some technical reason, but have casted their vote. Okay, we see the highest vote for scenario 3 so far. Villagers who could not do their cropping because of heavy flooding caused by dam construction demanded the government to give them compensation as reflecting human rights-based approach. Very good. Okay, some people cannot join the vote. Okay, don't worry about it, and you can also respond it later when we have a discussion. And second highest vote is the last one. A group of researchers try to help mitigate the problem of shortage of water in the highland area through scientific innovation, right? And then we have local authorities inform people in the community that they have granted a concession for a mining project that will start next week. Good. So these are three top three votes for situations that reflect human rights-based approach. Very good, very interesting. I wonder if anyone would like to volunteer to share their thought a little bit on why they voted for this scenario 3, villagers who could not do the cropping because of flooding caused by dam construction demanded the government to give them compensation is reflecting of human rights-based approach. Any volunteer, please? You can unmute and just share your thought. Anyone who voted for this. Oh, now we have the 3 situations of similar voting. Okay, we have Chara would like to share. I see you've unmuted. I cannot hear. Okay, this is difficult. Okay, cannot hear you. Anyone else would like to try? Why do you think this scenario is reflecting rights-based approach?
Good morning. May I share some of my thoughts?
Yes, please.
Um, I think that everyone have the right to access the water resources for their leads for their life. But if we eat in the upstream, there are some dam bill and they restrict the water come down to the downstream. So then the villager they they have the right to access the water, but now their right is violated because of the dam. So that's why I select the answer number 3. Yes.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so it's about the right to water, and a dam construction caused the blocking of water, right? So people cannot access the water. But here also the point is about these people, the villagers who've been affected by the dam constructions, and they cannot do their cropping. They also demanded the government to give them compensation. Is that part of human rights-based approach? Human rights-based approach also look at who are responsible for the deprivation of the rights or the violation of the rights, if that is the term we can use or you can be familiarized with. So violations of the rights to water, there are certain bodies that are responsible. The state is the main responsibility for our accountable bodies for human rights. Okay, and I'm also interested to hear why about almost 50% of you chose the last scenario, where a group of researchers try to help mitigate the problem of shortage of water in the highland through scientific innovation. How is that reflecting human rights-based approach?
Hello.
Yeah.
Can I have the idea?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I think for water scarcity in the highland area, it now a big problem, especially in central part of Vietnam, the central highlands. We now cultivating lots of coffee, cacao, and other industrial plant. What we are facing now is crop. We have no water accessibility to irrigation system because of the dry season. We have no sweet water anymore. We dig, we exploit a lots of groundwater. But problem here is as you know that we the farmers still have conventional or traditional farming system which consume a lot of water. So in this way, we have water shortage, and we have the traditional farming system which consume a lot of water. So the researcher will help the farmer, and of course they will provide the advanced technology like shaving water technology for like drip irrigation and other type of advanced farming model that can save water. I think they did a very good practice for
Right.
this
Okay,
reason.
good. So the scientists' innovation help solve the problem of shortage of water, and that's why you say it's a rights-based approach.
Yes.
right? And I'm just wondering, this is for maybe we can discuss this afterwards, but I'm interested in knowing why then this the last situation where a group of researchers try to help solve the problem to scientific innovation has more votes than the first or the second question, where you have a group of students volunteer to dig a well in the village that's also face drought problem, or a company through the CSR system trying to have a reforestation, canal cleanup campaign, also to support environment protection, which probably can be beneficial to the environment, maybe the water sources as well. I'm just wondering, this is you can think a little bit about it. We can come back to this question. Why did you choose the scientific innovation as reflecting rights-based approach and not the first two, not as much? Okay. We'll go to the input that I would try to share with you when we talk about rights-based approach. What are we talking about? So we'll go back to the slide, please, Egos.
May I have a question? Sorry.
Yes, Oh, is that you? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, for me, it's the very first experience for me to learn the rights-based approach from you, and I have no experience for this kind of approaches. But my idea is, I think when we talk about the rights-based approach, I think every measurement of every action, I think, should take before something happen. I think
to take preventive measure, right?
Before something happen, I think.
Right.
For example, and number 3 is your question. Number 3 is conversation. I think should not. I think come after the dam construction. I think this is my idea. So thank you very much.
So you mean with number 3 and the flooding is not related to dam construction, or it should
related to dam construction, but before we build the dam, I think we have to take measurement. We have to make consultation with the local people. I think that's why. So conversation is I think it's too late for us to reconstruct the environment, not only for the physical but also for the human. That's why. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for that observation. I agree with you that actually before construction of any large scale project, there should be environmental impact assessment, to see what would be the impact of that project on the communities, on the environment, and all those different natural resources. Yes, so this is a little bit of the kind of after scenario, and then what do you do when this impact already happened? But yes, before this took place, there should be a process that when we use the human rights-based approach, we would also have a process where the communities would need to be consulted, for example, before the projects is constructed. Okay, right. Maybe we'll just go through the input first, and we can come back to the questions. Hopefully, we'll try to make sure we have time at the end to see if you would choose a different answer or have different explanation to it. Okay, so when we talk about rights-based approach or human rights-based approach, I kind of use this interchangeably. What do we mean? Mary Robinson, who was a former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights back in early 2000, when the rights-based approach was actually promoted and adopted by the UN system. And people were not sure when they would do development projects and all this, they didn't use the rights-based approach. They used what we call welfare-based approach or needs-based approach or charity mode. So to provide assistance in development project. And now people thought, those people who've been working in development projects thought that, okay, they've been doing these projects for a long time, digging well and building schools. They couldn't solve the problems in the communities. You know, it's a short-term solution, but the long-term requires a rethinking of the approaches of how we do this development projects. So Mary Robinson came up with this statement that, or explanation, that a rights-based approach is basically a process of human development that is normatively based on international human rights standards and operationally directed to promoting and protecting human rights. So here there's some key terms: the international human rights standards. And if you have not been working with human rights based approach, you might not be familiar with international human rights standards. So basically the international human rights laws that most of our countries have ratified. Ratified means we've signed on to it. Our governments have signed on to these international norms, and we're supposed to be abided by. The governments have obligation to fulfill these laws, to make sure that they follow the standards. Okay, so basically under this international human rights standards, next slide please, they recognize water as a human right. Somebody just explained, water is a human right. When we use human rights frame to understand the issue of water insecurities, we have to, the starting point is recognizing that water is a human right. It's not something that given out of goodwill, but it's an entitlement that everyone is entitled to water. When we say something is a human right, it means that we are entitled to this, and somebody has a responsibility to make sure that we have access to this water. Okay, so that's as a starting point. So when we use this framework of human rights to understand water insecurity, then we would say that if water is a human right, the next step to understand is that water insecurities then are the result of the state's failure to respect, protect, and promote human rights. Because human rights standards require states to take actions and to be accountable. So states or the governments are the prime responsible or duty bearers. We would use that term. I'll come to that slide. Yeah. So the next step is that then when we said, how do we fix this problem of water insecurity? We would require state accountability as part of it, as a main part of it actually. Okay, any questions on this slide? This is an important conceptual frame when you want to understand and apply rights-based approach. The starting point of your analytical frame of how do you approach the issue of water insecurity. The starting point is this, and the steps that follows require engagement and understanding the role of the government.
Okay, may I have the small question?
Sure, please.
Okay, this is very interesting the conceptual and framework about the human-based approach. So regarding on water, this is the human right. So could you please make clear what the human right related to the water? Because human right is very wide definition, you know. So what the indicator that we could make clear this?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I will try to cover some of this in the presentation, but there's a lot of details of what aspects of access to water, or what are the rights that people are entitled to when we talk about rights to water. There are a lot of details, but I try to give an overview of this, and there would be more materials that you can study for yourself if you want to go into very details of what right to water covers. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. So when we want to use rights-based approach in the water research, we can look at two aspects, two related aspects. The first aspect is related to the standards. So when we talk about human rights standards, you're asking me, so what is it? What rights to water do we have? So we need to look at these standards or the international human rights laws that specify what rights to water everyone has. We call it substantive rights. The second part is the process. How do we integrate rights-based approach in the process of doing your project? Okay, so there's two parts. I would start first with the first part on the standard or substantive rights because it's quite, I guess, for those of you who are not from the human rights or law background, you might find this to be quite alienated. Okay, so next slide. Let's start. When we talk about the right to water, you need to, I guess, to know this international human rights law, which is called International Covenant on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights. Abbreviation is ICESCR. And all of our countries, Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, and the Mekong countries, Cambodia included, the governments have ratified this international human rights law. Ratified means they have signed up to it and they are obligated to ensure that they fulfill their obligations on this law. And this ICSCR, Article 11, Paragraph 1, say that it's the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions. Here it didn't say the right to water specifically, but adequate standard of living, it can be interpreted as an entitlement to sufficient, safe, acceptable, physically accessible and affordable water for personal and domestic use. This is the second slide on the right, is the further interpretation of the first clause in the main international covenant, ICSCR. Okay, so the second part is the interpretation of it. It's called general comment. This statement comes from the general comment made by the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So basically, to make it simple, I'm trying to make it simple. So we have this international human rights law, which says that everyone has a right to adequate standard of living for himself, including food, clothing, housing, for improvement of living condition. It didn't say right to water. But the committee that monitor this specific international human rights law further elaborate that the right to water is included in this specific clause about adequate standards of living. And the right to water means sufficient, safe, acceptable, physical, accessible, and affordable water for personal and domestic use. Does that help you see what the right to water may include? That everyone is entitled to sufficient water, safe water of acceptable quality, and it should be physically accessible and affordable for the purpose of personal and domestic use. This is the initial interpretation of the law. Yeah. Chandan, when you asked me that question earlier, is that a bit clearer of what right to water might include? Okay, I will go a little bit further to show you. Next slide. That when we said right to water, it's not only for personal and domestic use, but in the general comment made by the Committee on ICSCR, they also elaborate that right to water is important for the realization of other human rights. And other human rights, in this case, we have the right to food. And so food production requires water. Health, we have the right to health as a human right. So to maintain good health, you require sufficient clean water. Environmental hygiene is also another right that we have, and that also requires water. So when we talk about rights to water, it means these different contexts are related to the rights to water. And if we go in more detail, the next slide, we would see that, next slide, please. That the elements of the right to water includes these four aspects of adequacy, availability, acceptability, and accessibility. What do we mean by adequacy? We need water for human dignity. We need water for health. Water needs to be adequate for health. Water needs to be adequate for life. And water is a social and cultural good. And it's not only water use for this generation, but we need to think about water use for the future generation. That's the element of adequacy when we talk about the rights to water. And then we also talk about, or the law, and so we means, the international human rights law also prescribed that water needs to be available. Available for personal domestic use. And it specified that we can refer to the WHO guidelines for the quantity of water required per person. At the same time, we need to consider special needs of people. We have people who suffer certain illness, women who are pregnant, women who are vulnerable, or people in vulnerable situation may need more amount of water, more quantity of water than normal. Okay, what was the chat? Sorry, I missed that. I think the right to water should also include for safe water. Yes, exactly. It includes safe water. If you look at the next column, which is acceptability, that means the quality of water is important. Not just you have any water, but the water must be of good quality, must be acceptable. So must be safe for personal use, and the quality must be acceptable for domestic use. So it means the color, the odor of water also needs to be acceptable. That means not polluted, exactly. And this is written in the international human rights law. Okay, so you can quote this when you want to use this right to water framework to justify or to explain that, certain situation is not acceptable, that we have polluted water for communities, it needs to be addressed. So it's against the rights to water. Does the right to water also include functioning river and wetlands, which in turn will provide good water to all in the long term? We can argue for this. We can argue for the source of water, because where would the water come from, right? One good thing about human rights, I like about human rights, is that, it can be expanded. If something is not said or written in the document or in the law now, it can be, how do you call it, negotiated. it's really using your imagination to make use of this framework as broad as possible to benefit the people, the community you're working with. So if functioning rivers and wetlands can be considered a source of water and it has been destroyed for some reason, it has been obstructed for some reason, and that obstruct the accessibility or availability or acceptability of water by certain communities certainly is related. But you need to link that to these different elements of the right to water. Here, the last column talk about accessibility. So what means physical accessibility? So if, you know, in the highland, if there's no water sources and people have to walk for 10 kilometers to access water. So physical accessibility is a problem, is an issue now. So we need to address that. How do you make water more accessible physically? Economically, if people have to pay so much to get water, it's not economically accessible or affordable, right? And people need to have information about water sources. So people need to have access to information that's related to water or anything that would impact their livelihood. And all these different elements are based on the non-discrimination principles. What does it mean, non-discrimination? It's a very important principle. Anybody want to share what you understand about non-discrimination principle? Non-discrimination? No? Okay, next slide then. I'll show you. Non-discrimination means the right to water should be enjoyed without any discrimination. Discrimination on the following grounds is prohibited: race, color, sex, age, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, social origin, health status, including HIV, sexual orientation, civil, political, or other social status. It's very broad. That means that if provision of water is being made by the government, but it's supposed to be for everybody, but for some reason, it excludes certain group of people from accessing the water, then it's a discrimination. This discrimination can be what you call direct or indirect. Direct means that there's certain laws, policies, or practices that say that certain group of people are excluded from accessing certain human rights. In this case, right to water. Indirect discrimination means certain laws, policies, or practices did not say that they exclude certain group of people, but in practice, it made it difficult for certain groups of people to access the water. So you can think of scenarios if this might happen to be the case in the communities that you're working with. If there's direct or indirect discriminations taking place in terms of access to water. Okay, is there any question on this?
Hello, may I have a question?
Yes.
Could you please go back to the previous slide, please? The previous one, the 4A's principle. Yeah, that's right. Yes, I guess these 4 elements of the right of water is very interesting, and I think is equally important to understand. Just take into the consideration of the transboundary water impacts of hydropower development upstream in the Mekong region. And if you just taking this into consideration, like 4A's here, 4A's elements here, it's all about the quality and the quantity of water. And I think makes a lot of sense in the context of the transboundary impacts of the dam development costs, that had a lot of negative implications for the rural communities, the parent communities in the downstream region, like for example, like Cambodia or Vietnam, the Vietnamese Mekong Delta. So in this case, I'm just wondering how do you, on what legal basis would we stick to in order to argue for this? For example, like, examining or evaluating the right to water, is that, for example, like, is that holds true for individuals or groups or communities? For example, in this case, is there any chance for people living in the Vietnamese Mekong Delta, put a claim against, the building of hydropower dams upstream, for example, in China, because to make sure they, they can fully or adequately assess the water, resource of water, like the seasonal water, of flows of water every year for their agriculture production, for example, because it caused a lot of complexities over the last few years, like in terms of too much water or too little water. You see that a lot of, complexities going on because of the, the hydropower development on upstream region, just regardless of climate change impacts. But here, in this case, they focus on the transboundary water impacts caused by the dams upstream. So I just wondering, we just think about, take all of these four elements into consideration, and what legal basis do we, comply with in order to, argue against the equitable utilization of water shared by, Mekong River, as stipulated by the 1995 Mekong Agreement. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a very important question because common resources like water, especially in transboundary, there's always a lot of issues and sensitivity around negotiating and agreeing on the governance of these common resources. So with specific to the rights of water, there's or any rights actually that is contained within the Covenant on Socio-Economic and Cultural Rights. There's a prescription that says that any activities undertaken within the state party's jurisdiction should not deprive another country of the ability to realize the right to water for persons in its jurisdiction. So it means, yes, any activity, if China wants to do something, they need to consider the effect on another country's population, that they should not be deprived of water. This is broadly stated this way. And so it says that the state should not or should prevent their own citizens and companies from violating the right to water of individuals and communities in other countries. So there is this clause that is broadly regulate or provide that, countries need to consider its own action, that it would not have an effect on other countries. But how much this kind of legal basis can be made against countries like China, which is quite powerful, right? Is another step, is another question. One thing I would have to also share with you that while we have all these international human rights laws that countries need to abide by, and civil societies or citizens should demand their government to abide by this law. Enforcing this international human rights law is another challenge, because it's a standard that's supposed to be applied for everyone, but in every country. But it's also a political issue to make sure that the USA or China, for example, follow or abide by certain human rights that they may be violated. It requires another strategies and another process of international community, the collective bargaining within the human rights negotiation to make the big and powerful countries to comply by this international human rights law. So while we have these standards, and they can be very good tools for use for citizens, for civil societies to demand their government accountable, when it comes to cross-borders issue, it becomes a little bit more tricky. But there are different avenues that we can put this in a larger forum, in a larger body, in the UN human rights processes, have the space to bring this kind of issues up for negotiation. But I think this is something, if you're interested, we can talk more about, because it requires more knowledge on the UN and human rights mechanism, which I'm not covering at this point. Yeah, I hope that answer provide initial answer to your question. Can we move on to slide 11? Okay, I just want to explain this. This is how obligations under the human rights-based framework work. So we have what we call duty bearers. Mostly they are state actors, and so different ministries, agencies, local authorities, they are duty bearers. Rights holders on the other end, upper end, are the people. They are individuals, they are groups. So duty bearers have the obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of individuals and groups. So in this case, right to water. And the duty bearers or the state also have the obligation to regulate private actors, companies, from violating the rights of individuals. If companies build dams or any large-scale project under the concession of the state, for example, that deprive people of access to water resources, actually the government or the state is failing its obligation to regulate those companies. So the duty should be that the state regulate the companies to make sure that they don't violate the rights of people. Okay, so we have this triangle where the state needs to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights, and also regulate the third party from not violating the rights of people. Any questions on this? I will explain a little bit further on what does it mean to respect, to protect, and to fulfill. These are different kind of technical terms in human rights language that you should be familiar with if you want to use the human rights standards as a tool in your advocacy. You can use the policy advocacy using this human rights framework. The next slide. Okay. To respect means that the state must not interfere with the enjoyment of the right to water of people. Can you think of an example where states may interfere with the enjoyment of the right to water of people? So if people are in, yeah?
Yep. Yes. Before I just go focus particularly on the respect of the state, I just had a kind of little concern about how to make sure the framework, like the human rights framework, just divided in the previous slides. I think it's, to my understanding, it's just all about relationship between state and society or a community. And for the triangle that you provided in the last slide, for example, and I think it's most of the times like this, very theoretically, it's a very ideal framework, okay? And in practice, it's a different story. And most of the case, like the state takes sides with the private sector. Take an example of the hydropower development in Laos, example. And so many cases, like the state, they kind of establish a kind of framework or through the investment, in terms of like development, economic development, they most of the case they kind of set up like a they call it like a, how do you call it, the coalitions, like they take side with each other, okay, to ensure that they to achieve their own benefits. And this kind of correlation result in a lot of negative impacts on another party, another actors, like here in this case, community or the community or the people in general, or society. You can see that the private sector, the dam developers, they try to invest in building a lot of dams in Laos, and they signed a lot of memorandum of the contracts with the state of Laos. Then who is suffering from this development? And the state, the societies or the riparian communities, they usually they live on the river. They live on the livelihood just depends on the river, the Mekong River. Then because of this development, this impacts their livelihoods a lot. So in this case, in terms of respect, protect, and fulfill, that's a very, very beautiful words or terminology put in the framework, but in practice, in terms of executing the rights or executing these such principles in reality, I think it's this quite contrasting things that I have observed in the case of hydropower development. I'm not sure what about the others, cases. I'm not sure, but that's the case that I work on in my recent project. It's very clear. And those here in the rights, the water or the right to water or the rights of livelihoods of the communities is not guaranteed because of the kind of correlation set up by the state and developers in terms, private sectors in this case. As a result, these three, respect, protect, and fulfill, is not guaranteed, warranted to bring kind of the shared benefits to the communities. Yeah, that's just my comment based on my research project. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that contribution. I think it's very important to note here that the people in power, or the state, especially in our case, would be reluctant, right, to give the power to the people. And yes, we're hoping that we would have good states that would respect the rights of people. But most of the time, throughout history, people need to demand these rights. And people need to demand to realize that they have these rights, and that the state and people in power are actually violating the rights. In this case, not just by themselves, but working with the third party, private sector, which is increasingly becoming very powerful. So they are allying the state and private sector, making good allies to violate the rights of people, and to make sure that this framework can be operationalized. You need strong civil society. You need people to be aware and to come together to demand for these rights, because they will not give it up easily. You see, especially in our part of the region, we don't have very strong civil society in our countries, right? Laos, I think in Vietnam, Myanmar, in Thailand now. Well, in Thailand, it's a big movement going on, lots of things going on, but we continue to struggle for this. So this will not fall from the sky. This framework will not just happen without the knowledge and the awareness of people like yourself, that you work in the community. And you need to also raise awareness and mobilize people in the communities to recognize that it's their right, it's their entitlement. It's not something that the government should take for granted, that they can give or not give water to people. So it will take a lot of work to make sure that we move along this journey of applying human rights-based approach on our projects and programs in our country. Working just in isolation, with your own projects, and looking at respect, the technicality or aspect would not help move things along this human rights-based framework. That's why I think it's so important that all of you are aware and can see how this framework could be integrated in the work that you are doing. And to move a little bit along that line, you might not achieve or be able to do everything, but now you know that who are accountable. But the next step is, how do we make this happen? Is the next step. But first, you need to identify that, yes, things are not right the way they are. Okay, because actually it's about time that we break into groups, because the next questions I'm going to ask you to actually try to identify how your governments are respecting, protecting, fulfilling the rights to water of people, or are they not doing this? And how? It's not just, I suppose, not just only related to the hydropower dam project, but maybe in other aspects as well. And I guess you can show the next slide with the discussion question. So I would ask you to go into the breakout groups and discuss these 3 questions. So if you can identify how your governments, if you work in different countries, you can refer to the context of your specific countries and communities. How do they respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of water to people, or how they are not meeting these obligations? And then in what ways your project is contributing to helping these duty bearers to meet their obligation, or enabling the rights holder to claim their rights. So can we spend 20 minutes in the breakout groups for you to discuss this question, and at least come back to share at least one response for each question from each group to the plenary? Would that be okay with everyone?
Achan, maybe we can break for 5 minutes because we need to assign people to the groups.
Yeah. So you break for 5 minutes, you have virtual coffee break, and then you go in the breakout group. We'll come back at 11.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Along the way, we see how things are going on the ground. But the next step is to just to negotiate with the stakeholders. And I think it's a very difficult process because it's hard. It's because it's at a central level. Because much of the case we just do things on the ground. Interacting with the local communities, local government agencies, and it seems that it's very hard to raise the voice up to the central level, let alone to the national level or at the level of the MRC. But I think the key thing is to raise the issue and just provide the evidence to present, okay, how these are things that's going on the ground, and this we have come up with from the research. And I think it's a very tough because it takes time. You just said that in your presentation earlier. So I think it takes time. I think it's hard to bring on together because I had a chance to talk to representative of the government agencies at the provincial level in the Mekong Delta, and of course they kind of participate in kind of the national Vietnam National Mekong Committee, what's going on faced by the local communities in the Vietnamese Mekong Delta in terms of the water resources, you know, and the droughts and all that stuff over the last few years. But then it depends on how much, on to what extent the National Vietnamese Mekong National Mekong Community raise issue to the MRC, or take it into account and talk to the national the Laos government agency, for example. But another thing is a very ironically is now Vietnamese governments try to invest in the Luang Prabang hydropower projects, and there's no, it's hard to convince that, okay, on the one hand, Vietnamese government invest in building the Luang Prabang hydropower in Laos, but on the other hand is we suffer a lot of complexities caused by the hydropower dams in the Vietnamese Mekong Delta. So the kind of contestation, a lot of contestation, and it's very puts Vietnamese people in in the very contestable position in claiming, okay, we should stop building dams in order to avoid the complexities it's caused to the Vietnamese.
So you might,
yeah, that's very tough.
Your project might need then to explore how you engage both with the rights holders, but also the duty bearers, because it seems like you need to work on both sides, right?
Yeah.
Go up just on the the higher level. It would take time, but you would need a lot of awareness and support from people in the communities, and perhaps there could be alliances with other communities and countries who have similar issues as well. So this could become truly a trans-boundary kind of activism, if you want to make it that way.
That's right. Yeah. So far, I think it's in this.
Can I don't want to cut you off, but I'm just wondering if other members in the group, they have other different issues that they want to share in terms of where you working on from in Vietnam as well, and what are the issues that you identify? Can you identify any particular ways that the government may respect or protect or fulfill human rights to water, or they are not doing this? Other people as well, you would like to share in relation to your project.
Okay, good morning. Actually, I'm working in An Giang University, the university in the southwest of the Mekong Delta. And let me explain a bit why I vote for the scenario number 5. You remember? 5 scenario, yeah, and I vote for the scenario number 5 because I'm thinking I'm a lecturer and also researcher working in a academic environment. So I think I have more opportunities than the local people. So I think we and I need have responsibility to do the good thing for the people there, because we have more chance, more knowledge, let's say knowledge, and opportunity to learn outside the country. So we need to share back to do something for them. So I vote for number 5. So I want to share with you. And for our project, Dr. Thong also mentioned about his project, transboundary project between Vietnam and Thailand. But for my project, we do a project within Vietnam, because our thinking, the water right, not only between countries and country, also within the community inside the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. Because the Mekong Delta of Vietnam, we have the 2 parts, the upstream and a downstream. If the people in the upstream use more water, that means less water is available for the people downstream. So we take the responsibility to raise awareness, to invest the techniques for the farmers in the upstream, like in An Giang province, to have them, to encourage them to save water. So when they use less water, that means we have more water for the people in the coastal area to prevent saline intrusion. So we would like to work with the farmer, with the people in the authority, with the NGO, how to build the community awareness. Hello, you need to save water because every people have the same right to access to use water. So we save water for us. We just use enough water we need in order to release to save water for other people in somewhere in the coastal area of Vietnam. So we want to do that. We would like to enrich that issue in our research. Yeah.
Okay. So do you see any roles of the authorities in being responsible for ensuring sufficient water for the communities or access to water? Do you see any roles of the authorities?
Yes, in terms of how to manage water, we will work closely with the Department of Rural Agriculture and Rural Development, because in our system, this department have the right, have the ways to manage water. They will still, because they will set the seasonal calendar, and it also to build up the training course for water, and also to build a model for farmers to follow. So I think we will work closely with them at the province, district, and also community level. Yeah.
So you're working on water governance, right?
Yeah, water governance.
Okay. So you don't see that the local authorities are violating the right to water of people at the moment.
Violating the right, sorry, I don't get your point.
Violating the right to water of people. Are the local authorities or any part other agencies of the government, are they violating the rights to water of people? Like in the case that I think Dr. Chan was saying, that with the hydropower dam that is sponsored by state, by the government, right, with the private sector, but that has an impact on the people. So they are violating the rights to water of people. So in your context, are the local authorities or any higher government creating any negative impact on the right to water?
I could say that because in some parts of the Mekong Delta, people, they have the policy for farmers to use 3 drops of rice. That means farmers have to use a lot of water all the year round. And if the upstream farmer use a lot of water, that means in the dry season, no water will go down for the people in the downstream. So in our project, we also build like the, let's say, collective adaptation or collective response, how the people in the community should work together, not only individual, but they should work in the group, because more people join in the collective action. That means more water will be saved, because for water have no boundary. It cannot be saved or cannot be stored in one field. Have to be a big scale. Yeah. So I would like to build like the big action, the collective action for local people, local community. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So probably you can identify how your project can engage again with, that local authorities more strategically, and also work with the communities to make sure that they have real participation and decision making in different elements that you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Any other project? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I don't know if we have enough time. We have 1 minute, but For other people in the group, are you working on different projects, or we have to go back to the plenary? Are you in the same group, Haji and Nyan Bao Vi? Are you in the same group with the other participants who just shared? From AIT? Yeah.
Actually, I'm not the same group with the others. My project is about assessment of the atmospheric deposition on the water quality. So actually, for my project, we mainly focus on technical with the running model for water or for air and for water. So we not have much with interaction with the people, and so that's why I'm not really active in the breaking room, but I've learned a lot from other participants.
Yeah, but maybe it's important that you explore how your project might engage the people who, who make policies that have an impact on this atmospheric with
So sorry for the interruption. So what I said was that from the presentation, we know that the state has the obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill the right to water for the people. So state here as a duty bearer, and the people here as a rights holder. So in our group, we need to discuss first. Maybe I can show my screen so you can all see the question. Okay, let me know if you cannot see my screen. The first question that we need to address is, in your experience or your context, how does the state respect, protect, and fulfill the right for the water of people in the communities? Yeah, so maybe we can use the context in your project. You can speak, unmute your microphone and speak. Or if anyone cannot use the audio, we can also use the chat, and I will document the conversation here. Please, can anyone give example of how does the state respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of water? Any volunteer? Maybe Dr. Na can start.
Hello everyone. I start for the question. Actually, in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam is very famous in rice production.
Yeah.
Yeah. But nowadays we have problem with the water security because we could not because a lot of dams in the upstream, so the water sometimes is not enough for rice production. Yeah. The government, the state or the government, we recognize that. So they organize the training workshop or something like that to train the people, to train the rice farmer how to use the water, how to sell the water. For example, they train the farmer how to apply the AWD. That means alternate rice wet drying. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. But actually, the money or the human the time is not enough, so we could not organize for whole farmer in the Mekong Delta. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is our situation in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta. Yeah. So the farmer just nowadays, just some rice farmer they apply AWD. Yeah, not all. Yeah, not all. So we could not sell the water. Yeah, much water.
Okay, I saw the answer from Achan Pichamon. Maybe Achan Pichamon, you can try to speak. I can hear you. Can you try?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Now can.
Oh, great.
I don't know what's wrong.
Well, good that it's working now. So my response is that in our project, we look at subnational state actors. So we look mainly at district governments and the role that they play in water planning. And so the strategies that they come up with should ideally help to protect and fulfill the rights to people for the rights to water, for people in the community. And at the same time, these district governments can better respect people's right to water by arranging inclusive multi-stakeholder dialogues, as well as involving communities in the co-production of water management knowledge.
Right.
Yeah, so what you have up there.
Sure. Yes, so I just copy your comment in the chat. So that's really useful. Other comments on this? Maybe anyone has the example of how the state protect the rights of water from what Achan Chan mentioned, the third party that's trying to kind of disturb the enjoyment of water by the communities. Maybe anyone has that kind of context in their project, or any such experience? How the state protect the rights of water? Anyone? Maybe I can ask Nguyen Khan. Can you open your mic and try to share maybe your thoughts about this? Okay. What about the other? Any volunteer? Okay. Achan Pichamon or Dr. Na? Any thoughts about the rights, protecting the rights of people?
I discussed already for the first question. Yeah.
So this is how the government, you think how to protect the rights of people from the dam development, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What about if any government is kind of developing policy on how to, maybe if private sector is trying to kind of develop something, is there any experience in your country or in your experience to see any policy that protects the right of water?
Well, I mean, you have environmental impact assessments and social impact assessments, although those tend to be a bit harder, I suppose, to get businesses to comply with. But normally EIAs,
right,
of course, are part of the law.
Yes.
So that's one way. I mean, the rule of law is one way that governments can help protect and fulfill and respect the rights to water of people.
Yeah, I guess when we talk about policy development, it's different with the implementation, right? So the implementation in the field can be different, but actually the law is there and the policies are there, but that can be viewed as a way of protecting the rights of people, but different way we see the implementation. Any other comment? If not, then we can move on to the next question. So the next question is, in what ways are the states not meeting this obligation? So what we mean by this obligation is the obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill the right of water. So if you know any case or incident where the state is not doing their obligation to protect, respect, and fulfill the rights, please share.
I feel like this is going to be a very long list.
Well, this could be a very long list. Maybe you can identify the most common one that we can all relate to. Go ahead, Acham.
Do you mean me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think following on from that point about EIAs, I mean, the state can, there have been instances, right, in the region where the state overlooks laws and fast tracks EIAs without really requiring the company or doing its own due diligence.
Okay. Any other idea on how the government may kind of not meeting the obligation? Maybe from others? Yeah, Dr. Nana.
I discussed a little bit for our situation. Yeah, in the Mekong Delta. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I told you already that because we are affected by dams from upstream.
So who developed these dams, Dr. Nana?
In my opinion, Vietnamese government should discuss with the country in the upstream.
Okay.
How to share the government and no the water. Okay. Yeah, how to share the water.
So these dams are developed in the upstream, so it's outside of Vietnam, right?
Yeah. So Vietnamese government should do that. Yeah, but now it doesn't work well. Okay. I know Vietnamese government do that, discussing on that, but it doesn't work well. So the rice farmer in the Mekong Delta still have problem with the water shortage. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Understood.
Yeah. That's all for my side. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other comments on in what way, any example, in what way the state is not meeting the obligation. I can think of one example which maybe not, I don't know whether in Mekong countries there's such a case, but in my country, for example, I'm from Indonesia. So there is a lot, in the past, there is a lot of privatization of water supply. So this in turn may also endanger the fulfillment of the rights of people, because the private sector can play around with the pricing of water, and in a way it's kind of the government is letting the third party to kind of interfere with the enjoyment of water. So this is what I see, my example. So probably I shouldn't include my opinion in this, but that's my experience.
Yeah.
But if you have other example like that, for example, if any example like that, please share. Maybe other from the other. Chaura, you can open your mic and share your perspective on this. Maybe anyone has heard this kind of cases where the government is failing on meeting the obligation of to protect, respect, and fulfill the rights of water. Please share. If not, we can move on to the next. Anyone? So the last opportunity, maybe for other. Any other comments on this? No? Okay. So we'll move on to the next one. The next question is maybe this is more close to your project context, closer to your project context. How is your project contributing to helping duty bearers, in this case the community, to meet their obligation? Duty bearers, in this case state, to meet their obligation, enabling rights holders, in this case community, to claim their rights. So there are two things here. One, your project can contribute to helping the government to meet their obligation. Second, your project may have contribution to enable the right holders, the communities, to claim their rights, to get their right to water. So any perspective from your project on this? Any volunteer, please?
I'll add something, because our project is about the co-production of knowledge.
Yeah.
So we are trying to work with district governments as well as with schools,
yeah,
to help them set up more inclusive knowledge co-production processes in their strategies and in their planning. And then at the same time, we're working with communities in order to inform them about how they can play a bigger role in in the policy making and decision making processes.
Okay. Yep. So what's the co-production addressing? What issue is being addressed with the co-production of knowledge?
So it's really about managing water resources, but also allocation of such resources is one of the key areas of focus.
Okay.
So water allocation, yeah.
Okay. From other project, maybe, Dr. Na, from your project, I know that your project concerns a lot with not only the right to water actually, but it's also the right of food, right? So maybe you can share what's your contribution, the project contribution. Dr. Na? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I forgot to put unmute. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, on my project, I work with the community, the local community on IWD. Yeah. And we estimate together with we estimate the benefits of the AWD on the water saving the water, on the water saving. So we hope when we carry out the AWD, the community community get recognized that is useful. That tool is useful for them. So then we discuss with we discuss with the community to maybe to write out some needs from the community. Yeah, and we submit the community need to the government. Yeah, to ask the government to carry out to scale up. Yeah, scale up the DAS model. I mean AWD. Not only this area, the research area, but also another places. Yeah.
So, so you are trying to convince the government to scale up the technique, right?
Yeah. Because the local people need. Yeah.
Okay. So, but Dr. Na, so
yeah,
how far do you think the government so far, listening to what the community needs, or are they just doing what they want? Like the government is just doing what they want without like consulting with maybe you can very short, so because our time is running out, maybe just one sentence.
Yeah, not only Vietnamese government, they also learn listening to from the community. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for your participation. It's very useful thoughts and opinion. Maybe I can later on we can volunteer one of you to kind of report the findings from this discussion. Thank you very much. See you.
Thank you, August.
Bye.
Okay. How about Thi Big Nyok? I've only got very short names here that I can see, so please.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Ngao. I'm from Vietnam. I didn't join any projects from SUMERNET. This is very new concept for me today.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Tao Hung.
Hello.
Hello, who is that?
Hello.
Great.
Hello, I'm Thảo. I'm from Vietnam. I joined the project bringing more than food to the table.
Thank you, Tao. Great to have you here. We have Lee Nguyen Hong, is it Hui? Okay, I can obviously tell that there are some people that either cannot hear or they cannot speak with us. So once you have talked, could you please turn off your microphone? And could anyone else online please open their camera if you have not said hello, and please say hello.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Trần Đăng An from Vietnam. I belong to the Shadowa project. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else online? Okay, well, it seems like we've got at least some people able to talk and communicate, which is great for a discussion group. Now, this morning, Ajahn Jan talked us through human rights-based approach and really provided us with some ideas and a bit of thought starters on what is a human rights-based approach and what it could mean for our projects. And she has now provided us with 3 questions. I would like to start with the first question, and I will type it in as well. But the first question is, how does the state respect, protect, and fulfill the right to water of people in the communities of your project? And I'd particularly like to call on someone from the Voices project, because they deal with the COVID issue. So that's a very immediate issue at this point. And perhaps someone from another project as well, just maybe Al, if you are there, maybe you could think about your project, about bringing more than food to the table, and think about how the states respect, protect, and fulfill the right to water of the people in the communities for your project. So Min U, would you like to share with us just your thoughts? Nothing, you know, nothing definitive, just your thoughts on how the human rights-based approach really lets you think about how does the state respect, protect, and fulfill the right to water of people in the communities you are working in.
Yes, thank you very much for the chance. Like I discussed before, I think I don't have much idea about the human rights-based approach, method, but I think in my idea, I think in our project, I think mostly we have different approach, different area. It means that we have a mountain area, mountain people, and we have urban area, urban people, and we have the delta area, delta people, especially who closest to the ocean, the coastal. So I think in that case, if we think, or I think for example, so in mountain areas, I think we have a mountain people, very remote area, so they have a lot of water scarcity problem, and so, and among the mountain community, they also have a different social problem and like a social equality and something like that. So in that case, so in our project, so we think about in that case, in case of COVID-19 impact, so most of the local people are right now, so some people are get a very accessible way to, to get the water in their areas, but some people who live a more remote area, especially there's no transportation infrastructure, something in some areas, so they have to accept the water from spring, and also stream, something like that. So in that case, we have seen so many differences in case of access to water, drinking water. So in that case, I think we also involved with engaged with the state, not state, but local government. So I think in that case, I think the local, up to now, local government, especially rural development, also have tried their best to distributed the water to the community, different community levels. So, but they still have some difficulty due to their their funding project, something like that. But now, only the people who live more urban area can access more water that from the government system. So I think we still have to improve, and we still have to engage with the local government to try to get the voice, to include the voice from the more remote area, especially for their related issues. So this is our idea, this is our right-based approach. So I think the local government have to take the responsibility and have to take the accountability for those people, I think more remote people, the people, the community who have more difficulty to access the water, I think, in the future. But in that case, also now we have a plan to engage with the local government to try to implement this kind of idea. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And your idea about identifying the local government as part of the state in this question is very clear and is the right approach. So the state has many levels, from international to national to provincial to local, and all of them are that representation. And it is good to hear how you are working with that state to make sure that the solution can be shared, so that you get to address the issues about respect, protect and fulfill within that framing. Al, would you like to share with us perhaps your thoughts on your Bring More Than Food to the Table project, about how the state respects, protects and fulfills the right to water of the people in the communities that you will be working in?
I would like to talk the state takes responsibility to protect the water right access for community. First of all, the state protects, regulates the private sector. The private companies have to monitoring the quality of water before they supply to the community. And the second one, the government regulates the private sector about the master plans for community supply water for community in the long term and in, for example, in Anjang province, now more than 90% households can access tap water. The government also takes tasks from companies who access and supply water to households to make sure that they use water efficiency. The state government also requires the water access for community who they open more pipe and engage more NGO government in the area, remote area. It had to access the water. They engage with NGO, corporate NGO to supply water for ethics group.
Excellent. You're moving on to the question 2 as well, about how when the government cannot respect, protect and fulfill the right for water, what things are being done to overcome this. And so this is good to hear about these partnerships. Before we jump on to question 2, I'd like to come back to Tran Van Ang, who is interested in answering this first question about how does the state respect, protect and fulfill the right to water of the people in the communities. Tran, would you like to open up and talk?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm so sorry because my desktop have no webcam, so I just making a voice. Okay, so from our research project, Serua, we're working with a farmer who doing the rice production in the central part of the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. So the government, as you know, at the traditional, the farmers use the water from the river for irrigation and also for water supply. And the government support to, you know, the making the good irrigation system, providing enough water for the irrigate the crop, especially rice, and also protect the water quality, especially some like company discharge the wastewater directly into the canal and river. So some department, depending on the local authority, they will prevent and they protect the water quality for the community. And also the government also ensure that the farmer can access enough the quantity and quality of water for drinking, especially in the household demands, and also the irrigation system. Yet while now we are trying to improve the irrigation system and also the water supply system for domestic use. Yeah, that's all in our project. Thank you.
Leonor, we can't hear your voice.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to follow on and say, moving on to question 2, which is in what ways are the states not meeting these obligations? Coming back to your irrigation, water and access work that you are doing with SUMERNET, is that because the state is not providing adequate access to water for the farmers? Is that because it's not protecting their rights for access, or is that because there's just less water and there needs to be a redistribution? I'm just curious.
Okay, you know, in the Mekong Delta now, the not so much water come from the upstream part into the Mekong Delta. So I mean the water level now decreasing. So the government try to ensure that the farmer can access enough to quantity and quality of water for irrigation system. They support to the making the new pumping system from the main river into the canal, and then delivery to the each farming system to ensure that the farmer could have enough water, not only quantity but also quality, to irrigate and also use for domestics. In some part of the community that use the water supply system, water supply plant, use direct raw water from the river and canals. Yes, that is the responsibility from the government, that they ensure that the farmer can access enough water in terms of quantity and quality in our project. Yes.
Thank
Is
you.
my clear for your question?
Yes, thank you. That is very clear. I think our other 2 projects also talked about the government's role as making adequate access to the quality and quantity of water desired by communities as well. Can I ask, across all our projects, is there responsibility for the local communities or local farmers to change practices to deal with the current amount, quantity and quality of water that they currently have as well? Tran, are you looking at that in your project? And Tao, are you looking at that in your project as well? We have 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, I have some interruption. Just could you please talk again on your question or your discussion?
No, that's no problem. We have 2 minutes left in our discussion. And I think we've seen 3 examples across our team here that has talked about how is your project contributing to helping duty bearers to meet their obligations and enabling rights holders to claim their rights. And I think we have heard from 3 projects how they are doing this in slightly different ways for farmers, for community, and also for local individuals with the government. Would anyone like maybe Let Nguyen or Nguyen, would you like to add to this discussion? Or Thi Big Nok?
No, thanks.
Okay. Excellent. Well, it looks like we're just about to leave this room. So thank you for your discussion. I will share a few points back with everyone once we are in the plenary. Or would someone else like to do that? Tran Dang An, would you like to share a few points back from our discussion today?
Yeah, maybe we have only 50 seconds, okay.
Okay.
Better hurry up, okay.
Great.
Okay, so in our project, we try to make clear the now water contamination because of the use hue of pesticide. So we would like to have the government that they make clear the serious problem of water contamination in our case study.
Okay, I guess everyone is back. we haven't finished from our group, but maybe as she can share in the plenary what we'll be discussing. But okay, maybe it would be good to just hear back briefly from each group of what you discussed that you found interesting on these 3 questions that I posed.
Hi, Ajahn Jan.
Yeah.
Yes, I had a really good group discussion. We did not get through all the questions though, but it was really nice to hear how we have projects that deal with farmers, community, and individuals, and they are working with the state in different forms, such as local government or at the more provincial or state level, and that they are taking different approaches for how to deal with water shortages or the issues around water quality. Particularly farmers that down in the Delta are being faced with less water access. There's just less water around. And so their research projects are working with the farmers and working with the government to identify what water quantity and quality is needed so the farmers can be successful. So this is one way that some of our projects dealt with the issue about how state was addressing respect, protect and fulfill water rights, and how when these weren't being met, how the science was helping fill that gap. So the future will hopefully have better access for farmers to irrigation water so that they can respect and they can fulfill their water rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting to hear that the project works kind of collaboration. right? And work in collaboration with different authorities and using the scientific input, the expertise that the researchers have to kind of contribute to that. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. They were also very good discussions from other projects as well, but that's just one I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Ka, and from your group, Agus,
So
did you facilitate a group? Yeah.
also in our group, we had a very interesting discussion, mainly actually based on two projects. One is about co-production of knowledge on water resource management and allocation, and second is actually addressing water scarcity in the Mekong Delta, especially in the context of rice production. So very interesting to see the inside of water on, for example, on how the state is not meeting the obligation. One of the obligation is actually related to, because the context is on the dam development in the upstream. So one of the obligation of government is actually to negotiate with the other countries on how to kind of share water and how to manage water along the cross-boundary or trans-boundary river. So one of the obligation they feel of the state is to kind of to protect the rights of the people, is actually to negotiate with the other waters on how to have a good management of water resources. That's what I would like to share.
Okay, thank you, Ka. Very interesting. I think similar to the group that I was in, share about this impact of dam development project, and it looks like the state is not really trying to respect or protect or fulfill the rights of the communities. So in what ways then the project might try to engage, you know, to have a discussion with 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 different levels of the authorities. So that's one side, and perhaps also we're talking about the need to engage with the local communities, how they could be built more aware of the issues that facing in terms of their rights. So that is one aspect. And the other aspect, the other project relates to water governance. You know, the sharing of water, the management of water between the upstream and downstream. Some policy on rice cropping may have an implication on the use of water. So this needs to be discussed both with the local authorities and also with the local people that are working and are having an impact on that. So I think the issues we're facing could be seen like I don't want to say either we work with the government or we work against government. It would be good if the project can work to support the state to ensure that they can respect, protect, and fulfill the right to water of people. But in case where we have local authorities or states at the higher level that are violating the rights of water to people, what can the project do to kind of mitigate this? You still need to engage, I guess, with the authorities because they are the decision makers on the one hand, but how do you engage so they become they are open to hearing, you know, the problems and the issues that are being faced by the community. So that's on the one side. And how do you then work with the communities that are affected by the policies or the projects that is supported by the government to be informed, to be aware, and perhaps be engaged more in the project itself to see what direction that the project can go in terms of empowering the people. So I think these are some thoughts that came out from the discussion. So very good, very interesting, and I hope that you can have a little bit further reflection on how your project might engage with the duty bearers and rights holders at different points of the project to move along this rights-based perspective, rights-based approach. Okay, can I go to the next slide? I just want to share this statement, which I actually mentioned it earlier, on the obligation of the government related to domestic and international transboundary resources. This one, yeah. So when it comes to cross-border issues, again, the state have the responsibility to ensure that their activities within their jurisdiction, means their territory, do not deprive another country of the ability to realize the right to water of their own people within their own jurisdiction. So this is what we've been talking a little bit about in terms of the duty, the obligation of the state, right? And then the government should also regulate their own citizens and companies from violating the right to water of individuals and communities in other countries. So here we have the room to explore different actors who might be implicated in the projects, in the the context that each of you are working on, that are the companies involved, there are private sectors involved, and what's the relationship with the state, if there's any kind of regulations that the state is making to ensure that companies do not violate the rights of water of people in the communities. Okay, so that's about the standard of human rights that could be useful, could be applied in your project. I would like to move on to the other part on the process of human rights-based approach, of how you might try to integrate this into your work with the communities. So next slide, please. When we talk about human rights-based approach as a process, we talk about three principles, well, three overarching principles: equality and non-discrimination, participation and empowerment, accountability and transparency. Okay, next slide. No, okay, this one. When we talk about equality and non-discrimination, I mentioned earlier, you ensure that your project does not discriminate against certain groups of people because of your activities, or at the end of your project, you come up with certain policy recommendations that it does not result in discriminatory policies or practices. And this especially for marginalized population. So what you can do to ensure that your project does not directly discriminate or end up indirectly discriminate against any group, you will pay attention to the different needs and situation of people or the groups in the community. Because even when you work in one community or one village, there are multiple, there are different populations: women, children, elderly, those who use water for agriculture, I guess for different purposes. There would be different needs if there are particular vulnerable groups in the community. So you might need to understand what are the specific contexts of the group. Ensure that project activities, here I said already, do not directly or indirectly exclude or restrict people from enjoying their rights on the ground of either sex, gender, age, language, or other statuses. So I think you're doing this by basically trying to understand your context first and see what are the different identities and different members of the communities are there and what are different needs. Yeah? The second level is, or the second principle is not this one, the water bottle. Go up one slide. Yeah, this one, on participation and empowerment. Now, you could ask the question, how participatory is your project? So from the bottom part is what symbolic involvement. You might say you involve community, but if you don't share information at all, or you just say that you're working with them, but they are not really participating in any way, it's non-participant. It's non-participation, it's tokenistic. You said you engage, but you don't. And even you engage by just informing them about the project, that, okay, we are doing this project. We are here researchers doing this. It might be just a one-way communication. Okay, can you hear me okay? There's a sign that my connection is interrupted. Maybe the signal is not good. Let me know if my voice is cut off. The bottom rank of participation is one-way information. You can tell about the project, but you are not getting any response. You are not soliciting opinions from people about how the project should go. So that's one way. So if you remember the scenario that I put in the beginning, I think scenario 4, and that the government informed the communities that there will be a mining project, or that they have given concession to a mining company to start the project next week. So yes, the government informed the people, but it's quite late. Just informing and starting next week. There's no consultation or anything. Still participation, but it's very little, very minimal participation. We want to see more and meaningful participation. So moving up the ladder would be seeking consultation about the project, your own research project. How do the community see your project contributing to the situation, to improving the situation, right? What do they want to see happening? So you might organize a consultation meeting with the community. Or better, if you can, at the beginning of the project, although I know you have already written a proposal, get it approved, you have a very clear idea of how you're going to implement this. But if you can still involve your community strategically somewhere, in terms of when you say strategically, that they inform or their ideas shape the direction of the project. If there's something that you can still adjust, in terms of your project direction based on the view, the perspective that you gain from hearing the communities, that would be a strategic partnership, right? And ultimately, if you want a full participation and control by people, they would have a lot of say in decision making, how the project would be done, so they would be part of the project. So I'm not sure where you are at for each of your project and level of participation. So this is something you can think about. If you want to have more participation than one-way communication, you can try to design your activities to meet that, to get more participation higher up. So I think with people being involved, I think they would take ownership, and you would have more success in terms of sustainability as well, because the more people involved, the more ownership they feel they have, they would be able to put a lot of time and effort in making it meaningful for them. Okay. And the last aspect is about accountability and transparency. You can start asking the question, or maybe you already asked and have the answer. To whom is your project answerable? The funder? SUMERNET? Yes, you would have to be accountable, answerable to SUMERNET who provided grants for the project. But at the same time, you are also answerable to the communities, right? The people the project is supposed to benefit. And how do you share information with those people that you're answerable to? You can ask the question, how accessible is the information that you make available? And how does your project help to build capacity for people to hold duty bearers accountable? I already asked that question, but also empower the right holder. So it's about accountability and transparency as well. Okay, any questions on these three broad principles of human rights-based approach that can be used to guide the process of your project activities?
Hello. Can I have a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes. In a nutshell, I guess that the terminology of human rights-based approach is kind of what it presented is very interesting. What I think is, in reality, I think is to what extent is practice in reality is a difficult question, because human right is a kind of politically sensitive concept in such a kind of totalitarian country like Vietnam, for example. Like, in what way should we kind of take it off, go away from it? Just don't just really use the term like human rights in our work, but I just take it like using the kind of another terms to replace. Just I think it's because it makes a lot of it causes a lot of complexity. If you just use a human right, you just use human rights. In our research, in the way we communicate with the local communities or local government agencies, because like, oh, well, what do you mean by human rights here in this case? So it makes a lot of complexities in terms of politics, and misunderstanding, and it impacts a lot with how much, to what extent we, implement the projects is definitely unveiled. So just in your opinion, do you have any comments or any kind of strategies in dealing with this, in particular context of Vietnam yourself? Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. This is very important also, and the word human rights scare a lot of people. I must say, when I work on human rights and use this term, it makes people scared and they don't want to kind of involve. So I use the term just non-discrimination, equality, justice. We want to engage constructively, even with the government, even we know that they are not doing the right thing. But we still want to engage constructively with them, because sometimes they don't know that they are not doing the right thing. It's also an educational and learning process that we need to take them along. That okay, that we want to make it just, make it equal. We want to equality is, I think, the principle that Vietnam holds, right, based on that socialist values. So I think equality is one word that could use to as an entry point to kind of understand and have a conversation on, okay, so what's happening with the policies and practices that local authorities are doing. Does it have any possible impact in terms of equality? Are people benefiting from this project? Or so I would approach that way. And also, I don't go and tell them that you're not doing things like you're bad, they will not work with you. So you approach them in a friendly way. And yes, you don't even have to use the term human rights at all if you don't feel like it's the right entry. But it's about, yes, having a fair society, having a just society, having a society that does not discriminate against people, and to make sure everyone is included in inclusive society. So that is something I have used, and I think, yeah. Okay, does that help, Dr. Tran?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Yes, don't get me wrong. Don't start go back and shout at the authorities, right? Don't scream at them and they do bad things. No. We need to be constructive in our engagement. We need to recognize that they are facing challenges too, because they want the countries to develop. They have different agendas that they need to respond to.
Sure,
right?
indeed. Yeah, indeed. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Okay, next question. Next slide, sorry. Or I would just, because we need to wrap up, I think. I just want us to reflect a little bit on what we discussed. Not yet, this one. Okay. So if you haven't realized already from the input that I try to provide of how the human rights-based approach differ from other approaches or perspectives, you think back on the scenarios that I gave you. The first question that asks, or the first scenarios that says that a group of students volunteer to help dig a well in a village that face recurring problem of a drought. After what you heard me, do you still recognize, would you still take that as a rights-based approach? Or are you still not sure? We'll need another session. Okay, with people volunteering to do something is good. It's good for the community. It's good for the society. There's no doubt about it. But whether it takes the rights-based approach or not, I would say this approach is called charity approach. So people try to do things out of goodwill. Maybe they didn't recognize that the right to water is the right of people, but they do it because people don't have the water. So they come and help dig wells so people can have access to water. There's a lot of things, activities like this in Thailand as well. Students here at the universities go to build schools in remote villages because they're not school in remote villages, right? But this is a charity approach. It's good for people who do it, but does it ask the structural question? Why is it that this village suffer from drought? And what are the government obligations to ensure that people would have access to water? So instead of students doing it, maybe students need to go and work with local authorities to see where the budget goes. Well, if they have budget or they have the resources to ensure that there would be water provision or accessibility of water in a sustainable way. So people don't have to come and dig well after wells every year, or build school every year, build new libraries every year. So that's what happens. So rights-based approach, asking deeper questions in terms of structure and systems, policies, institutional practices, what is not being done by the duty bearers. Okay, so we're not saying volunteering is not good. We're not saying that. The same thing with your researchers. Having this scientific innovation to help people, it's a good thing. But we want to make sure that this is sustained, right? Your initiative is going to last. You need, after you leave the project, who is going to take care of continuing what you discovered, the innovation that you put in place? So you need the institutions, whether it's the local authorities or the communities, to be part of this, to make it more sustainable. So it's an initial part of, it could be an initial part of rights-based approach, both this first scenario and the last scenario, on the students and the researchers. But it needs more. It needs more to make it a rights-based approach. It needs to touch on the structural and system issue to make it sustainable. Okay, so this is the same way with the CSR, corporate social responsibility programs of companies, right? The one on local authorities I already mentioned, they could be seen as participatory, but not at the high level of participation. So they might be using a rights-based approach, but very minimal. Authorities informing the communities, right? Villagers who protested or demand government for compensation, they are actually exercising their rights. But as someone said earlier, that it should be, we should look at before the dam was built. What has been done? Was there any consultation? So that's a more important part that we need to recognize from the very beginning. Any development project, you need that process of consultation, and it's the right of people to be consulted and be informed about the things that would impact their life. So that's the reflection on the scenarios. So based on what we discussed, I hope this helps you clarify a little bit more on what the rights-based approach look like. Okay, you can think of how it can add value to your proposed research, what elements of rights-based approach are already in your research, and what can be strengthened. Okay. So I think that's it. If you have any last thoughts or questions, I'll be happy. I don't know, Leonie, we can have just one more minute. I know how.
Yes, we can have one more minute. Is there any kind of questions or queries that we have from everyone around the table? I think it's been a really good session with lots of thoughts. I know in our discussion group that once people got talking, there was more thoughts and questions that came up. So at this stage, I'd like to ask Ajahn Jaan, how can people get more information about the human rights-based approach?
Yeah, I think I sent the guidelines along to Agos, and has references. So the two references that I put in that sheet are very useful. One is actually a handbook developed by a group of UN and other groups that work on water governance, and it has a very useful and detailed chapters on different aspects of human rights and water governance. You can consult that handbook. And also I shared the general recommendation of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which has a very detailed description of what constitutes rights to water in different aspects. So please check that out.
Excellent, thank you. So that's in the Human Rights-Based Approach Guidelines, which are also on the SUMERNET website. Up there as well is a couple of blogs and articles that deal with issues around gender or around conflict, which has come across us today when we're discussing the human rights-based approach. And of course, there's the podcast as well, which addresses some of the questions similar or slightly different to what we've been talking to today. So a big thank you, Ajahn Jaan, for all of the input and insights that you've provided with us today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just before we all go, I know that there's been a lot of information, but we have a survey that we would like everyone to undertake. At this point, I think Agus has put the link in the chat box. So it's just back to the VVOX site again, where you can either use the QR code or just pop in and fill out the survey so that we can learn from these training lessons as well. What works, what doesn't, what we should do more of. So please share those insights. While you're undertaking that survey, I'd just like to take a little bit of time to say thank you, everyone, for participating today. There's so much more learning and real understanding of a topic when people open up their cameras, voice their opinions, and really engage in the topic. I'd also like to thank our tech support people here today. We've got Agus, Kay, Nguyen, all working hard to try and make sure that you can see, hear, and understand the training as it comes through. We had some solid facilitators, so a big thank you to all of those as well. There were about 36 people that registered to be online today, which covered 12 different projects. That's a huge diversity, and I'd just like to really extend our really warm welcome to everyone here, that even if you're new or this is the second time or third time you've heard about human rights, it's great to have people on board. Finally, I'd like to say a big thank you to our director, Chayanis, for her continued support in delivering on the research training that's essential for all of our SUMERNET projects. So thank you to everyone. We have just one more. I believe our director, Chayanis, would like to say a few words, but please fill out that survey just while we're wrapping up the training. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leonie, and for kind of leading several training sessions linking to our research support to many projects. And also, especially today, special thanks goes to Ajahn Chan, or her full name is Ajahn Vachalaluthai Buntinan. So we have been working closely in close collaboration with TEPC Network. And Ajahn Chan is one of the key members in TEPC Network. So basically, we're doing this kind of training, and many of us here, including myself, feel that human rights-based approach are new to us, new to SUMERNET. And today's session is really kind of useful. For me personally, I learned, I also kind of took part in the poll and the survey, and actually I learned a lot that, okay, by engaging in the research, contributing research, scientific contribution to the communities, it's good, but it's not yet really fully embrace or apply human rights-based approach. And we can do more. And individual of us here and individual project could do more. And you might have the question, what kind of level of engagement, information exchange, participatory approach the project could do? I think the best person who can answer that is your team. I mean, the project team yourselves, because you know who are the boundary partner. Most of them are the duty barrier. You know how to engage with them better, and what kind of entry point when we talk about human rights-based approach might not be human rights as a word to engage with them as an entry point, as Ajahn Chan has mentioned. So during this 2 years implementation period, so please feel free to reach out to Secretariat and also advisors. Ajahn Chan will still continue supporting us. And if you have specific questions or a specific kind of thought about how your project would like to engage, or you wonder whether this is okay, or or you found some exciting stories you would like to share with us and also share with other projects teams, so please feel free to reach us anytime. So because we are here working as a network, and we are learning and by doing this, and hopefully it really reach out. Of course, you are not accountable only for us, SUMERNET team, but really the communities who have the right, as a right holder, and they may not really fully aware that they actually, this is their basic right and they should really ask for it. And really big thanks to the whole team, and our big team here has worked very hard for several weeks. And I think we have 2 or 3 trainings lying ahead this week, and we will finish. Yeah, so that's really big thanks for me and all participants for your active participation. Yeah, thank you.